I don't know.
Go ahead.
Hello.
But you have questions? We're live,
I'm
but
just
that's all right. No one's really watching yet.
okay. That's good. Just trying to see if I can do the background, like blurred
Of course.
background. Or something.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to see how do I do it here.
You would do it under.
Oh, okay, that works.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't. My handwriting is terrible, but I'm not ready to erase it yet. I have some formula written down. All right, cool.
All set?
Yeah, all set.
Welcome back to Startup Talk. I'm your host, the Startup Coach, and with me today is Will Zhang, co-founder and CEO of OpenHouse.AI. How are you doing today, Will?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Can you tell us about OpenHouse.ai and your mission?
OpenHouse is a AI company for production home builder. So we exist to solve one of the some of the biggest challenge in uh, home building, in particular single family housing in North American market. So our ambition is to help home builders to be more efficient in building more houses more effectively and more profitable, so that we basically have more people to come build houses and solve these big housing challenges that we're seeing in North America.
It seems like a weird pivot to go from careers in industry like finance and telecom to jump into home building and AI. What
Mhm.
was the impetus that inspired your career shift?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, my experience has been working deploying AI actually since 2007, working for different industry from telecom, energy, or hedge fund, and yeah, even work for oil and gas company. So before everyone called this exciting theme about AI, it's basically I started working that in business intelligence and machine learning way back since 2007. So when in the early days of my career, I'm pretty much sector agnostic. But what I realized is when you're working for large scale system that have a lot of data, we can extract a lot of pattern to inform better decision, to help business to better operate. And that's actually very exciting for me because actually when I realized that when you actually get to work in those mega projects in Europe, you can see how your solution will impacting billions of people. That I find tremendous exciting. Um, but then later on, as my career progressed, I realized that I want to not only just do something impactful and significant, but also different. And around 2018 and 19, that's when I finished my business school. I was working for oil and gas company, and in business school, we were talking about real estate investment and real estate as a housing as an industry. I realized that's one of the most meaningful industry that provide basic need for human being. And I also started to get into the startup ecosystem, realize how um, antiquated the industry is in terms of using information data to drive decision making. And I figure maybe there's something I can do around that. More importantly, I can do something different because when you work for hedge fund, when you work for uh, oil and gas industry, using machine learning or AI is that's basically what everyone do. It's actually expected. But we're working for housing industry. That's quite different. That's something novel. And if I have a chance to bring something new to a very established industry, that would be very meaningful for me.
Yeah, and the home building industry, like you said, they're definitely slow to adapt new things because we've done it this way,
Mhm.
and there's a sensitivity to changing the cost per square foot at a whatever level when you're talking
Mhm.
about major companies. So they're sensitive to change. Can you tell us about your aha moment that said, open house AI is where I need to go?
So totally true. I would say actually every important industry they are cautious to change when solutions are not proven. It just turned out once we started and get our hands dirty on the industry, realize how complex it is. While it looks like just pounding nail and moving dirt or pouring concrete, in reality, when you actually think about construction, particularly outside field, it's actually very challenging to manage environment. Unlike a factory environment, you can have put a lot of control and monitoring system around that. Or if you think about digitized industry like hedge fund, is actually like everything is digitized, well controlled. When we face those physical phenomenon, that's when I realized how challenging the industry is. But as also part of that is that's what get us excited. That's get us as scientists and engineers to roll up the sleeve for the new challenges. And the aha moment was interesting. It's right around COVID time. So in the beginning, when COVID hit, um, actually before COVID, we were talking to home builders, production home builders, say, what if we can tell you what would be the housing demand by the market? What is the home that are more efficient to build? What are the home that also reduce the risk to like carrying costs or balancing the risk of the market, which is very cyclical. At the time, home builder would say, well, actually, I know my business. Like, what would you know more than me compared to the local market and years of experience? That's totally true until COVID hit. And when COVID hit, all of a sudden everything grind to the halt. No one know what's going on, and the market actually completely stalled for a couple months. And we were very fortunate to have a few home builder willing to give it a shot to say, well, maybe we can run a pilot with you. And we start to deploy some kind of predictive algorithm that we realized that, hey, if based on the trend that we see, there should be a high demand coming in. At the time, we were just doing predictive analytics. We were not sure why, but we do see very strong signal, and it played out to be true. A couple months later, now we know and we understand why. As people sit in their house, they're thinking maybe I can look for a new place because no one know how long this is going to last. They started thinking about maybe a different place that I should be living, or maybe I shouldn't live in the very tiny apartment. Maybe I can work remotely as well. So that opened out a lot of opportunity for people to rethink how do they want to change the living environment. So that's the first aha moment we realized that our prediction was very accurate. Now, of course, it takes some time for us to continue to prove it out. And the interesting thing about the last few years was that we almost like see multiple housing cycle within just last 2 3 years, because here comes later on the interest rate drop and then interest rate change and then supply chain challenges, all that. Every time the algorithm just very accurately predicted what will happen, and that's when we know, yeah, we can make this work for the industry.
COVID changed everything for definitely for real estate. It changed everything for a lot of things as offices downtown became empty. And I know lots of people who did exactly that, who had to live in Toronto all of a sudden that didn't
Mm,
have to anymore. And it changed um, remote working, changed geographic tendencies, where people wanted to live, where people like all of a sudden your commute is not really a concern. So that
right.
changed everything, as you know, because I know so many people who moved out of it. How, what kind of data points, how fast can, open house AI predict these changes and get in front of them as they start to happen?
So in terms of the algorithm model that we have developed, it's pretty much learning in real time every single second. But of course, for us to optimize the compute, we offer our solution to a client um, every on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depends on their need. But a lot of important decisions, they really don't change those decisions on a daily basis. We're working mostly with the executive team that will kind of make operational or strategic decision. Um, some even just basically need our report on a monthly basis. But in terms of algorithm, it's actually learning in real time. Every single second, every single click on the website, what happened on the CRM, what's going on in the field is actually constantly feeding into the algorithm and watching what would be the optimal operation decision that should be made at the moment in time. Yeah, so but of course, like almost every algorithm, you need to be fine tuned for each business. So we typically will take our large quantitative model, that's what we call it, and we will deploy for a customer, and it will train and learn, observe for 3 weeks to 4 weeks, and they will learn specifically about how that home builder operate. yeah, so it take a month to basically fine tune the algorithm for that specific client.
So, what are your biggest challenges, or were your biggest challenges, transitioning from industries like finance and telecom to more traditional space like home building, where again they don't necessarily move as fast as
Mhm.
other industries or embrace new technologies quickly? What do you feel your challenges were?
Well, in the beginning, the biggest challenge was we were very naively thinking, given the most powerful algorithm and compute that we have, we're gonna be able to change and deliver value very quickly. Turn out is a lot more challenging than that. In generally, when we first working with home builder, they say we have a lot of data as well, even though they were not very, even they were not fully digitized compared to our industry, but there's a lot of data in terms of costing, construction schedules, how do they manage and pricing, all those information. They already have a lot of website traffic, but the challenge was those data was not collected for machine learning purpose. I'm sure you will hear a lot of industry would say, I have a lot of data, but the question is, are those data meaningfully can help a business to actually build AI around that, to optimize decision, to the key notion is does it create a feedback loop of learning so the algorithm can actually test it out? How does it work or not? And how do we actually back testing the algorithm to fine tune them? Turn out there's really no data that fit for that purpose in the beginning. So we had to build a lot of solution to capture and build these connectors to their website, to their CRM, to their ERP. We had to build a lot of connection to these existing uh, software that have been deployed for years in this industry and streamline them to the cloud so that the AI can actually have a real-time feedback loop to understand how those systems are operating. And after a few years, we basically the first 3 year we spent first 3 year to in this research mode, and we collected roughly 4 million decision fingerprint. That's what we call like how a home buyer make decision from when they first just shopping all the way to closing and buying a home and take possession of home. Um, Over thousands of homes transaction, and that is a database knowledge we needed to build a initial understanding of the physical world for the AI. So those are the biggest challenge in early days.
And with your insights into, the home building industry now, I remember, I think it was during COVID, that the price of 2x4s, where it went up to almost 10
Yeah.
times the price of normal.
Mhm.
How does that impact builders' decisions? And how can Open House help builders in circumstances where supplies are dramatically changing in price?
Oh, absolutely. So the housing industry, home builder particularly, they are facing two typical challenges. One is the risk of the market. That's the biggest risk. Like there are times that the market is cool, there are times the market is hot. In reality, now we expand to multiple states, over 20 cities in US and Canada. So we realize that even at the same moment in time, one market can be very hot and the other market is very cold. And then, of course, you have interest rate, you have mortgage rate, you have population migration, all these factors coming in. So that causing the housing industry very cyclical. So most of the time, home builder are either you're in a hot market or you're in a cold market. Sometimes you're in a stable market, then you plan everything, but then it might disappear on you any second. So that make it very challenging for them to plan. Now, if it's a hot market, that's actually the situation we're talking about. It's not only supply chain, it was actually coupled with the hot market at the time because people say, well, everyone buying all these houses. So unlike I don't know, you buy something from Amazon, you buy something on Amazon, you transact, and then you get it home right away. So basically, the time of sale is the time of the business that actually take the money. But housing is different. When you buy a home, a consumer say I put a deposit. Now the home builder now starting to actually put more and more working capital into that home until that home is finished, which takes 6 to 8 months. Now during all this time, the price is locked, and the home builder now need to basically go raise to finish construction of the home, and they are now exposed to all this cost erosion. And that's basically the situation you're talking about because everyone sold too many homes. At the same time, we had the supply chain challenges. Now everyone go competing with uh, price, the lumber, the 2x4. That's one situation. Now you have other builder might run a different business models to say, I'm going to just go build speculative home before the buyer come, but then they're taking off a lot of different kind of risk because we don't know when the home finish if there's a buyer or not. So those are the home builder at that time are not exposed to those supply chain challenges. So how do we help home builder is that we actually help them anticipate what the market coming in. So if you say, I can see a market's coming in hot, so maybe you can start building more speculative home ahead of time. Or maybe you can say, can I talk to those supplier and vendor 120 day or even half a year ahead of time to say, hey, I know my demand is coming. Can you improve your operations so that you can supply to me and then I can secure those supply? The worst thing that can happen to the industry actually, there's something in the supply chain is called bullwhip effect, that you have all this volatility in the upfront causing massive waste downstream. So that's where we see predictive technology can really help regulate and optimize those efficiency downstream. Because what can happen a lot of time is that once you say, hey, let me order tons of 2x4, but now we pass that cycle and then you have a lot of inventory sitting for the vendor, even the trade is actually not good for anybody.
How have you assembled your team of game changers to bring your vision of at Open House AI to life?
So I think in a way we're very fortunate. We our headquarters is in Calgary. Well, we have team member in Toronto and Vancouver. But when we started, it was around 2019. We realized there's a lot of great talent here in town in Calgary. So number one, I was very interested in community building. I was involved in forming the Google developer group in both in Calgary and Edmonton because there's a lot of tech talent here. I was in tech for a long time, and I realized just not enough people know that there's a lot of tech talent in Calgary. So I was very fortunate to get involved in those community and community building and working closely with Google as a partner as well. And we were also even the first cohort of Google uh, Canada Accelerator Program. Um, so that gave us a lot of access and exposure to great engineer and great talent in town. And through that opportunity, we realized that there's a lot of very talented people that find themselves that they want an opportunity to make a difference. And that's where we basically the more difficult the challenges, the more unknown we're facing, that and the more people claim that it's impossible to build certain solution that appeal to a group of people that say, I would like to just give it a try and see if it's really true. If the unknown is really cannot be known, or can we actually know something? Or if someone say it's not possible to engineer a solution, we kind of want to say, is it possible to engineer what is others call impossible? I think that kind of mentality just interestingly attract a group of people who even they have well-paying job, they have in the established company, but they just want to do something different. Uh, that has been, in a way, our secret sauce of hiring and attracting people that kind of want to take up big challenges and potentially change the industry. After all, even to myself, I don't working in many industry. Um, you don't get to have the chance to potentially influence a change of industry in life. So I think that gets us very excited about it.
So I like to talk about culture, especially in
Mhm.
startups. And we live in a remote culture now where there's remote working all the time. How do
Mhm.
you develop a culture at Open House to drive innovation and success and still feel like you're a team?
So we are very put a very important weight to curiosity, um, uh, particularly in our stage of company and with our ambition to make a difference in the industry. So it's very much about being curious about why certain things have been done in a certain way, even though sometimes our client and our partners to say, well, that's the thing that has always been done this way. Um, but our culture and all the people we hire, we have a tendency to ask, but can you tell us a bit more? Because we just want to understand a bit deeper. And when we go very deep, from an engineering standpoint, we basically apply what commonly known first principle analysis to understand, is that really has to be this way? And that actually starting to give us an opportunity to reevaluate and see things differently. So we also, like, from a tech perspective, we basically are able to also bring our knowledge from other industry, how things could have been done in a differently. So that also very, very helpful for us. So yeah, curiosity is number one thing, that we want people who are very curious, intellectually capable, to understand where are things coming from. But the second thing also super important is the have the courage to ask difficult question or challenge the status quo. Does it has to be this way? Because when we're actually facing things that are known, we need to basically be willing to ask, is it possibly a different way to do things? Uh, that sometimes can be quite scary, and that means taking a lot of risk. And how do we do calculated risk? Uh, so on making major decision, or actually empower a customer to actually make key decision, how do we be rigorous around that? That's actually very important. And the last piece is actually stay very humble, because what we realize is that whenever we think, oh, now I know it, in a way you actually almost stop learning. So stay humble, stay curious, and just because we work in tech, just because we have seen a lot of different great solution in other industry, that does not mean that it can be immediately or automatically applied to a industry that people quote unquote call them slow to adopt technology industry, but have the humbleness to actually understand where is that coming from. That's when we start to appreciate the complexity of industry. Turn out is actually a lot more to than what a tech company can actually immediately make changes. It actually a lot of change in process and people and culture, how the industry operate. So we need to respect that. And yeah, so having that humbleness allow us to actually stay curious and stay hungry.
Yeah, I really like that. Stay curious, stay humble, and it reminds me of approach I always use. It's called beginner's mind. Like I want to
Hmm.
forget everything about this industry and start asking, okay, why? And it's
Exactly.
easier from if you're coming from outside. I'm not an expert. I don't have all these preconceived notions
Hmm.
of how things need to be done. So you can challenge things a lot differently, even though that's very hard on the person you're challenging
Yeah.
because it's down to the core of what they do. And sometimes it's a belief system because they've been working in this system for 40 hours a week
Right.
for how many years. And this is the way it's done. And you're like, well, why? Well, it's almost like a religion when you sit back and say, okay, well, why are you doing this? The fight back is somewhat
Yeah.
interesting, but it always leads to better conversations and better understanding on both sides. What drives you personally as an entrepreneur?
For me, is it's all about making a difference in something significant and important. So that's why I mean, in my career, I was involved in many major projects. I was in 2007 using some machine learning algorithm to help balance the power grid in southern Paris in Europe, and was involved in rolling out the first iPhone for 6 European countries for the infrastructure upgrade. So those give me a lot of fun. And to be quite honest, it took me almost 10 years to figure out what do I want to achieve in a career, because actually I was having fun in, I'm a technologist. I'm certainly a nerd. Uh, Love to watch YouTube video and explaining how math work in certain algorithm. That's actually my hobby. Um, but then what is the purpose in life? And it's really later stage when I was in business school, I get to meet a lot of great classmates in New York City. So I did my NYU business school in NYU, and these people from a diverse background give me a really interesting challenge about thinking about there's so much more than technology. it's actually very much about technology is just an extension of people's capability. It allow me as a nerdy person to actually redirect my focus back to people. And I realized that actually really what give me the most satisfaction is empowering people. And more than that is how do I make a difference for many people's life. Um, so that's when I realized housing is a perfect industry because if you think about in the basic need of human like shelter is such a fundamental need for people, and we see all these housing challenges. And I realized if we actually able to just be participating in making the industry, a massive industry, a little bit better, that is, if I know that I was able to make a small contribution to it, personally, I would be very satisfied. Yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. Can you describe some pivotal moments or milestones in Open House AI's journey so far?
Um, there's a few, actually, a lot of pivotal moment actually happened this year. Um, we the first moment, of course, like initially we realized, oh gosh, there's so little data that was built for machine learning purpose, and that was tough. We're thinking we are the it's almost like initially that's where the you really need to stay humble, right? So when we started, I was naive to think, well, I'm a great chef. I can go into a kitchen and I'll cook a good meal. But turn out that well, you actually need to upgrade your kitchen where you need to shop great ingredient. You also need to get a team together, and then turn out well, there's no fresh ingredient in this market, and now you need to change your recipe to adapt to that market. What's fresh? So using the analogy, the first pivotal moment is we were able to convince a few home builder to say, are you willing to open your company as a lab so that we can work and develop technology together? So that's actually like we were able to convince a few important business in town in Calgary and one in Edmonton that actually open up the door for us and let us to develop the technology. And like I mentioned, like once COVID hit, we start to see it's working. And then second pivot moment also is actually very early on. We decided, well, if we want to really make big impact for this technology to the world, we must go to a larger market in the US. So we have been very focused on US expansion to test our technology. Does it work in different market? And turn out it actually works really well. And once we feel ready, and this year, in the beginning of this year, that's when we basically start to put our focus into commercialization, and we have been enjoying great success. We have an amazing hire, David. He is our head of growth. We spent a lot of time. It took me probably more than 1.5 years to find the right person, right growth leader that who willing to take the risk and basically crazy enough to tell him that hey, we're trying to create a category to change the industry, and most people will kind of walk away. But then we're very very lucky to find someone who willing to take the risk and embark in that journey. So the pivotal moment this year, literally like just last 9 months, we were able to double our revenue and hit major milestone in our revenue goal this year.
You hit on something that many founders rush to decisions on, and it's hiring the first handful of employees and getting the roles right. You mentioned it took a year and a half to find the right person. A lot of people would have made that decision in a month and gone with the wrong person and
Mhm.
struggled. What advice do you have for early stage founders to have patience around hiring, and how do they know it's the right person?
Oh, absolutely. I make a lot of mistake. First of all, like that's how I learn, and I'm happy to share with it. Our head of growth not our first attempt. It's our third attempt to build a sales team. Um, Initially, as a tech entrepreneur, engineer, data scientist, I would say, well, I would like to kind of get someone. If wouldn't be nice if I have someone who can drive sales for me, do the business deal for me, then I can focus on building technology because I can see how powerful it is. Then there's a tendency for tech entrepreneurs. By the way, I don't know anyone from like founder from different background might have different feeling. But I talk to a lot of tech background entrepreneur. We have the tendency want to outsource the problem to a business co-founder to say, now that's your problem, and turn out that doesn't work. As a founder, you really need to know what good looks like. That can only be learned when you actually get yourself in it. So when I basically for quite some time, I'm the guy who sells. Of course, I didn't do a good job, but at least now I start to understand where am I not good at. Then I talk to a lot of great sales leader through whatever networking event I can to know what good looks like. But now being an analytical mind, I can now see how bad looks like. That's me, baseline. What good looks like, and then now you can start to see the differences. Once we understand the differences, then I'm starting learning what's the fit for us, because there are great sales leader who are not necessarily for a B2B market, or there's great sales leader that actually need to build work on a platform that already established. So it's basically fit for the stage. And that's actually a lot of questions, a lot of times is about understanding ourselves, which is actually sounds like easy, is actually turned out the most challenging thing to know. Understanding where we are and understanding what do we need, which is actually tied to our vision. So I think spending a lot of time to learn that is super important. And also be ready that you probably won't get it right in the first time, but it's okay to try. Um, but yeah, so but hold very high standard. Yeah,
Uh,
that's something important. Yeah.
All great advice. How does it feel to see Open House AI being recognized as a leader in its field?
It feels very rewarding. Um, it's actually not so much about open house. It's very much about the future of a home building. Um, if you actually think about, just say, a retail business or like Walmart, they need to anticipate what you need to buy and stock it, warehouse it ahead of time. Or even an e-commerce shop actually can easily understand the demand. How do they actually optimize their inventory? To the most extreme, most advanced is Amazon, right? So they basically, how do they do the 1 day delivery? Because they anticipated what you need and then put strategically warehouse those items to the nearest warehouse that can ship to you in 1 day distance. This is actually how many retail or many business actually already operating using predictive and prescriptive analytics and using or AI today. But home building is not there yet. But we now, with the current advancement of AI and where we're seeing the future and our success of a customer, we anticipate within the next 5 years, most home builders, production volume home builder, will be operating with the same capability. That they will be making major decisions in terms of how do they operate, pricing and supply chain management, project management using predictive technology, and being part of actually putting that, showcasing that that is possible, showcasing that that is actually making you more efficient and building better houses to market. And that's actually what we're actually most excited about. Um, yeah, so being a voice to actually convincing the industry that this is actually net positive for the industry, that's what we most find most fulfilling. And but totally is actually not us. It's more about the success of our customer that really demonstrating that the significance of change that is coming to the industry that we're most proud of to be part of this journey with them.
Now, after talking with you, the
Mhm.
home building industry seems like a natural place, but I would not have thought, hey, let's apply AI to this industry. How is
Mhm.
AI transforming the home building industry today? And how do you see open houses' role in this changing?
So if you think about industry, like there are three problems we solve for them today. So a home builder actually, while people think, well, home builder, land developer, they actually not a high margin business. Just kind of like for those who are not in home building, it took us a long time to learn. A major home builder typically have 20 to 25% gross margin for per home unit, but that's just gross margin. Their net margin is between 7 to 13%. Now, if you compare that to many other industry like entertainment or retail business or even tech industry typically is actually 80% gross margin. You can see home building actually the margin is very very small. Therefore, that's why I would say there's not enough home builder to building homes and houses for the market, unless we all say let government use taxpayer money to build houses, which is part of the solution, but not cannot be total solution. It has to be more participant, more player to come to build more houses for the masses. But they're not very profitable business compared to our industry. Now, then we actually look into that. How do we help the home builder to become more profitable and building better house for the market more efficiently? There's come down to three elements: how to increase the gross margin, how do you reduce the construction cycle time so that you can be more efficient and you can turn your capital more time within a year without the increase of overhead. That's the key thing, right? So if increasing overhead, your margin gonna erode it, then it's actually very difficult to move forward. And the only solution is AI. The only solution is AI to basically predict where the market is coming from, where the markets will be going, sorry, and what would be the potential future home that actually best fitted the market so you can create more value, but at the same time controlling the cost, anticipating and better organize your trade partner so that they can be on more efficient, they can reduce their price. That's the gross margin piece. But also, how do we strategically prioritize the scheduling and operation that's in the outside field, unlike a factory, that you getting right people, right material at the right time so that they can batch process the construction. That's a huge game changer. So, and then leveraging a lot of automation so they don't have to increase the overhead. That's where we see AI is actually completely changing the game for the industry. And one thing was interesting is we are very deep in the cutting edge research. Is that current large language model, there's a lot of hallucination problem, and that's actually what we are working very hard to solve that ourselves. That's why we call it large quantitative model. And if you're interested, I can elaborate more about how do we actually see about embedding the physical phenomenon of the laws of physics into the language model. That's what we're working on right now for the home building industry.
Yes, I would love. Let's drill down on that in a bit. So you're calling it's not a large language model. You're calling it again a what?
A large quantitative model.
Quantitative model. And to reduce the hallucinations, you're putting physics into this model.
Yeah, so it's the cutting edge challenge is actually how do we make it has reasoning capability? How do you bound the constraint into the system to say it has to follow this rule? I'll use a simple example. In the Newtonian physics, right? So the second law of motion, we know that F equals ma, which like the Newtonian discovery actually set the foundation of modern physics world, leading to all this great discovery. And the second law of motion says force equals mass multiplied by acceleration, meaning something moving, you have to apply the force to get it going, or you have to apply force to make it stop. Sounds trivial and obvious today, but for the last 10,000 years of history of mankind, this is only found only 400 years ago. So it's not that far away if you look at the time horizon. The second thing is actually not trivial, is that for Newton to understand this acceleration, he had to invent calculus to do that. So if you think about LLM, large language model, it's almost like the new invention of calculus. So that's actually tremendously powerful, so that we can discover those new phenomena. But one challenge in large language model is that it does not understand the causal relationship, meaning you can easily just mathematically change the formula to say, well, you know what, if I can increase the force or reduce the acceleration purely by just looking at math, I can change the mass because mass equals F divided by A, right? So, if I give more mass without changing acceleration, if I give more forces without changing acceleration, then the thing will get heavier. That for human is nonsense, but from mathematical standpoint, a large language model do not understand it. It's actually force the causal relationship to the acceleration. So that's actually what we're working very hard to actually think about deploying large language model to a industry that actually moving dirt, building houses in a physical environment that you are governed by the laws of physics. And that's where we realize that if we basically need to teach an algorithm that mass is something that you do not change, it's the force that causes the acceleration to change. And that's actually those are phenomena we basically need to feed into the language model before and after, and actually have this physical laws of physics bounding the large language model to make it applicable for this industry. And that's actually got us very excited about how do we also be part of advancing the technology development as well.
It sounds very interesting. You know, when you're training large language models, oftentimes you're fielding feeding it a scenario and then a solution, a correct solution, a wrong solution, whatever, on these tables to train it. How do you train it to understand that this formula equals the amount of physical dirt you have to move? Like it's a thing that's a leap, for lack of a.
Yeah, so that's actually, of course, like we do not have, unlike OpenAI or Anthropic, we don't have billions of dollars to spend to build our foundation model. We basically take advantage of existing large language model, also taking some open source model. And what is open source model? By absorbing the data from the internet in their latent feature, essentially they build a understanding or abstraction of the world. So that allow it to actually to create new solution in real time in inference time. So of course, when we feed data into it, we feed data based on by providing some, like for example, like we say, hey, mass is something you cannot change. We feed those into the model, but then when it's coming out, we then deploy tons of classical machine learning approach, layer on top of that to basically do optimization theory. So there's a field that is actually not typically. You can put it as part of AI. You can. Some people might not. There's a field is actually called operational research. Is how do you minimize or maximize the objective function, like basically, for example, minimize the cost or maximize the profit of the business or maximize the utility of a resource with constraint. And those constraints are the physical law, the laws of physics. And also, when there are uncertainty, how do we play out to know if this situation, what would happen? If the other situation, what would happen? When we're making decision under uncertainty, we use a lot of Monte Carlo simulation technique that which involve a large volume compute, but very different compute compared to LLM. So we do a lot of things before and after by basically wrapping large language model, but on top of that, we just not just wrapping it, we put layers of more classical machine learning model that actually injecting the physical phenomena into the technology to help them to make better decisions.
And here's another question. Just again, I'm looking on the outside, coming in that
Yeah,
new
yeah.
mind. When you say math doesn't change, you know, I don't know if that's actually true. And when I say that, I'll explain that in a second. When you're
Please.
looking at a scenario, you say, I got to move this volume of dirt. Okay.
Yeah.
If it's clay, the mass might be different. If it's wet dirt, the mass might be different. If it's dry dirt, it might be different. If it's so, how do you explain that to say a computer AI model? Because the math actually doesn't change, but the environment changes enough that the formula math actually changes because of it.
Oh, absolutely. I was more referring to that's an
Yeah,
analogy, more like
yeah, of course.
in well, for example, you can say, hey, uh, like you can make a demand prediction, but the demand doesn't go negative. Uh, for example, like
Yeah.
but the mathematics would say allow you to put negative. You please now put boundary into the math model, but that actually all of a sudden it's more like in math now is not a continuous function, so that causes a lot of math just immediate breakdown. So your question is how do we feed that in? Is basically that's where it's actually in the post processing of the language model after you actually extract it out. So in input, we basically say these are the phenomena that you have to be grounded in the input. In the training data set, we actually also do a tons of feature engineering to basically bias the data intentionally to certain distribution. That's actually how in the early days, the RHFL technique for large language model, how do they train? It's almost like, I'm going to use another analogy to explain it. The internet might have a lot of cat information, a lot of cute cat. But if you want to ask a large language model, what's the most common picture you will see in the world, they might spit out as cat. So how do you actually correct that? Is actually you rebias those information back to the, the phenomenon you know is governed by the laws of physics. So that's in the input phase. But on the output, then when the outcomes actually go reach beyond those laws of physics, we basically then kick in other machine learning technique to say, well, that's the outcome that we're going to reject. There's a lot of governance, there's a lot of guidance, there's a lot of checks and balance around those to basically eliminate the obvious problem. And then the second layer is now we deploy simulation to understand the sensitivity exposure of such decision. How much risk are we actually talking about? So it's getting a bit more deeper in the mathematics, but it's before and after you basically put those rules and balance and policy around it, so they make the right decision for people.
I'm always fascinated about, how this is done and how different companies
Mhm.
are training AI and this large quantitative model versus, say, small language models and large language models, and how everyone's having a different approach, and now large
Mhm.
action models that are out there. It's really nice to see, how all these agents and things are coming into play. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs trying to bring innovation like these things to traditional industries?
Oh, I would say put a very important focus on value creation. So, what value are we bringing? Again, I'm more speaking to like the the folks who are similar to my background. When I started, I mean, technology is cool, right? You just want to like play with that, give it a try, and you know its potential. But it's not the technology. Ultimately, it's actually what value we can create to the people who need to lean on those technology. What value we can bring to the world. Um, Very much what problem are we solving? I think I'm sure most founder would hear a lot about that. But how do we actually also measure those value that you can create and hold us accountable not only on deploying a cool technology, just solving a specific problem, but measure the impact of the problem when solved. How technology really can make a huge difference around that. That's the starting point. The second thing is that why why look into understanding deeply why this make a huge difference, why this is transformative. Because in certain cases, right, maybe the technology is cool, but it's a incremental gain. But if the technology is transformative, it changes the paradigm of how the business will be operating. Then we actually need to deeper understanding of why is that true. What assumption are we carrying? Because a lot of time when we working with our client, and then we're very fortunate to have them trusting us, but we actually putting a lot of important decision at stake. If we are not being grounded in our understanding, how can our client trust us what we have been doing? So we basically need to, when we do our model, we have to back testing over and over again. And it's not just about the accuracy of the model of the technology, but also how robust it is. How is it actually going to be able to endure the test of time? So that's actually why we spend, basically, fortunately for us, 3 year, but at least five economic cycle to actually test our technology. So it's almost like we're very blessed because actually typically you see 7 years is the typical real estate industry cycle, and we're very lucky to actually have experienced that multiple cycle within just last 3 years. So, and now we know that my advice is actually just because technology work in a certain market condition, be very cautious and vigilant into the technology evolution to make sure that it will always work and be able to endure the test of time.
Yeah, that follows the analogy. Nothing fails like success, right? If things are working and you're not constantly
Mhm.
trying to break it and fix it, then next thing you know, it's not working anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Looking back, uh, what are the key lessons you've learned on your entrepreneurial journey?
The key lesson I learned is how important to make people around us successful and have the mindset to really optimize the success of the people around you rather than myself. Um, it's so much we can do as a team that moving into the same direction at the same time embracing the differences of great minds from our industry partner, our client, and even our team. I think, yeah, the greatest learning I realize is that as a technologist, how important it is to put the focus on people and what truly inspire them, motivate them, what is the motive behind it, why are they doing certain thing, and then think about what technology can be as an accelerator or a leverage for them to be more successful. So I realized that that actually bring me joy and satisfaction to knowing that hey, I was able to bring part of those to the picture, and yeah, so I think that's yeah greatest learning for me, and actually basically ultimately getting to know myself a little bit better. That turn out I'm not just a tech nerdy guy. I'm very much actually find it fulfilling to be able to help people.
How do you encourage, or would you encourage, traditional industries to embrace new AI driven solutions?
I think if the technology works well, the industry will embrace it. If we believe in the market as free market, it will just happen. Um, this actually like I have a change of mind. Like I get asked that question a lot when I started in working home building. Like people ask like, okay, how do you get them adopt technology? And turn out it's technology was too immature to fit to them. And that's actually where we're very excited about AI. Because if you think about the time of AI or machine learning, very much about you, hey, here's my business problem. And then, okay, now get a business analyst to document your problem and then find an engineer. Hey, these are the problem. Can you turn them into code? And then the engineer will say, okay, I'll turn them into code. Okay, but then, oh, but there's a situation that doesn't work. Oh, but you didn't tell me that. Now we can actually go back and forth to build that. Now we have a solution. Take Excel, for example. Now we have a solution. And now you need to tell the business or industry, say, okay, I have a solution for you, but now you need to learn how to use that technology now. But unlike AI, is like it's the other way around. It's a technology that just presents itself and it will learn and adapt to you. You don't need a programmer to actually change the rules. It actually kind of like go in, look into all the CRM data, ERP data, understand your operation POS, and then it's actually started adapting and realizing there's a gap and opportunity to improve it. So it actually really take a very sophisticated machine learning algorithm or current advancement AI to be able to make the technology to up to the standard to be able to deploy to a sophisticated industry. Uh, if the industry was not able to adopt technology yet, there's two things. One is mindset, but the other thing is if the technology is actually at that point. And I think now with the transformation of AI, technology ready for the home builder. The rest is actually just mindset. But then that mostly is just working with. You always have a early innovator, early adopter in every market. Is making them successful. Is ultimately is our client their own success will be convincing the entire industry that that's the way to go.
Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg recently said that in the next couple of years, we're going to see the first $1 billion valued company that is run by a single person. Um,
I'm not
and
surprised.
yeah, by, based on AI agents and whatnot. And when you extrapolate that into all these industries where, like at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about the real estate industry and going to talk to them, and people are like, well, we know the industry. We don't need help. We really understand the cycles. We really understand these things. And it
Mhm.
took maybe a change that threw them for a loop to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we really need your help. So, how do you crack that mindset to say, if you're not going to embrace AI, your competition will, and at some point you know, you won't be the competition.
What we're doing is just by empowering the best builder in each geo market. So in certain market, we already have market dominance. We're doing exactly by that because their partner, their business partner was seeing, well, why these builders operating differently? Why are they making strange decisions? Initially, it was like, that's strange, but then turned out like, oh, actually now I see why. Well, they were able to see the market ahead of time every single time, right? So they were able to make better decision every single time. And of course, they can see them. They actually become a more profitable business. And they was for those who actually would say, I'm curious, I want to learn what's going on. Those are the one that actually we're gonna bring them on board as well and help them. Um, but those one who resist to change, we believe in free market. Um, they will be eventually just not going to be able to compete, and consumer reward them because if you build better house for better price, why wouldn't you actually go to basic purchase from those vendors, home builders? And also, there's a new generation home builder will be coming in and say, hey, with this new technology, with what I have, with my resource and financial capability or my know-how, there's actually also new incomer will be technology native or embrace it in from the get-go. So that's actually, I believe, what the market will change and evolve by itself.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to look at all these things and stay competitive and understand that this is a new competitive advantage that everyone needs to be aware of. So,
Mhm.
where can our listeners go and find out more about Open House AI and your work, Will?
Oh, it's simple. It's just go to our website, OpenHouse.AI, or look at us up in LinkedIn. I know our team is actually constantly pushing even our latest research and what we have been doing, helping our client. Yeah, so OpenHouse.ai, that's the website.
Yeah, and the links will be in the podcast show notes for anybody listening. And we'd like to leave our audience with one actionable tip with our entrepreneurial audience you'd like to leave with thought.
Uh, I guess just if you were, I coming more from my own experience. I was working in big corporation, head of R&D for different public company. Uh, if you are one of those, you might say, "Hey, I actually want to do something different, but constrained by big corporation policies." And sometimes just give it a try and take a leap of faith, and you will figure it out.
Great advice. Take a leap of faith. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about Open House AI and the work you're doing and some of the advances in the AI field I hadn't even knew about before today. This has been a
Mhm.
great discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for everyone listening and watching.